The easiest person to lose is the one who has forgiven you too many times. Damian Moretti opened his eyes expecting another ordinary morning inside the sprawling Manhattan estate that had become both his fortress and his prison. The first thing he noticed was the silence. It was the kind of silence that did not belong inside a home where Emma had lived. Every morning, she filled the house with quiet routines that never demanded attention. Fresh coffee waited on the kitchen counter before sunrise. Soft music drifted through the hallways while she arranged flowers gathered from the garden. The scent of warm bread usually reached the master bedroom before Damian even opened his eyes. Today, there was nothing. No music, no footsteps, no gentle voice speaking to the staff. Only silence. Damian sat upright, running a hand through his dark hair before glancing toward the empty side of the enormous bed. The sheets were perfectly smooth, already cold to the touch. Emma had been gone for hours. He assumed she had gone downstairs after the painful argument the night before. He convinced himself she simply needed time. She had always needed time before forgiving him. For years, she had chosen patience over anger, understanding over confrontation, hope over disappointment. That certainty allowed him to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside his chest. He dressed quickly in a perfectly tailored black Italian suit, leaving the top button of his white shirt undone so the intricate black tattoos along his neck remained partially visible. Even inside his own home, the white Caucasian mafia boss carried himself with calm authority. Power had become second nature. Confidence had become a habit. Apologies had become something he postponed until later because later always seemed possible. As he stepped into the hallway, several members of the household staff immediately lowered their eyes. Normally, they greeted him warmly, but this morning an unusual hesitation filled the air. Damian frowned. "Where's Mrs. Moretti?" No one answered immediately. Finally, the longtime housekeeper swallowed nervously. "Sir, Mrs. Moretti left before sunrise." Damian barely reacted. "She has done that before." The housekeeper looked at him with quiet sympathy. "Not like this, sir." A strange heaviness settled over him as he walked toward the grand staircase. The elegant mansion looked exactly as it always had. Expensive artwork decorated the walls. Sunlight poured through towering windows. Fresh flowers still stood in crystal vases because Emma had arranged them the previous evening before everything changed. Yet the house no longer felt alive. Entering the dining room, Damian noticed a small velvet ring box resting beside a folded handwritten letter. His wedding band lay neatly inside the open box. For several seconds, he simply stared without moving. Emma had never removed that ring in 12 years of marriage. His heartbeat slowed into a painful stillness as he reached for the letter. Her handwriting remained as graceful as ever. There were no angry marks across the page, no accusations, no desperate pleas. Only calm words written with remarkable care. "Damian, I hope one day you understand that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I kept believing love could survive loneliness, broken promises, and being chosen second. I was wrong. I am leaving because I finally remembered that I matter too. Please do not look for me until you learn why I had to leave." Damian lowered the letter, unable to breathe normally. He looked around the room as though Emma might suddenly appear from another doorway, carrying breakfast and smiling gently as if nothing had happened. Instead, he saw only the empty chair where she had faithfully waited for him through countless late nights. The realization struck him with terrifying clarity. She had not left to punish him. She had left because she no longer believed there was anything left to save, and for the first time in his powerful life, Damian Moretti understood that no amount of influence, wealth, or authority could command the return of the woman who had quietly loved him long after he stopped noticing she was standing beside him. The emptiest houses are not the ones without furniture. They're the ones where love quietly packed its bags long before anyone noticed it was leaving. Damian Moretti remained standing in the dining room long after reading Emma's letter for the third time. The words refused to change, no matter how desperately he wished they would. They contained no bitterness, no threats, and no dramatic farewell. That frightened him more than anger ever could. Emma had not written like a woman trying to punish her husband. She had written like someone who had already made peace with walking away. Carefully folding the letter, Damian slipped it into the inside pocket of his tailored black suit jacket, as though protecting something far more valuable than any confidential document he had ever carried. For the first time in years, the white Caucasian mafia boss canceled every meeting scheduled for the day. His assistants were stunned. Business leaders, attorneys, and foundation directors all received polite messages explaining that family matters required his immediate attention. Damian ignored the endless notifications appearing on his phone. None of them mattered. He walked slowly through the mansion instead. Every room seemed to hold a memory he had been too distracted to notice while Emma was still there. In the sunroom, he found a small reading chair where she spent quiet evenings with a novel while waiting for him to return home. In the kitchen, he noticed handwritten recipe cards carefully organized inside a wooden box she had purchased during their first anniversary trip. Fresh herbs still rested beside the windowsill because she had watered them the evening before. Everything reflected Emma's quiet presence, yet the woman herself had disappeared. The longtime housekeeper approached him gently. "Sir, there's something Mrs. Moretti asked me to give you if she ever left." She handed him a simple leather journal tied with a pale ribbon. Damian recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Emma for years, but she had never allowed anyone to read it. Sitting alone inside the library, he carefully opened the first page. It was not a diary filled with complaints. Instead, every entry recorded small moments of gratitude. The day they adopted a rescue dog. The afternoon Damian surprised her with coffee during a charity event. The evening he remembered her birthday after, returning from an overseas business trip. Page after page reminded him of memories he had almost forgotten, while Emma had treasured each one. As the entries continued, the tone slowly changed. He promised we would have dinner together tonight, but another meeting came first. I know he carries enormous responsibility. I only wish he knew I miss him before he leaves, not after he returns. Several months later, another entry read. He apologized again. I believe he meant every word. I also wonder if apologies lose their meaning when they become part of a routine. Damian closed the journal for a moment, overwhelmed by a truth he had never allowed himself to see. Emma had never demanded luxury, attention, or impossible promises. She had only wanted to be chosen before everything else, at least once in a while. Near the final pages, he found an unfinished sentence written only days earlier. I still love the man I married, but I no longer recognize the life we are living. If I stay much longer, I am afraid I will forget who I used to be. Damian slowly closed the journal and looked through the library window toward the gardens Emma had lovingly designed over the years. Until that morning, he had believed she disappeared because of one terrible mistake. Now he understood that she had been leaving little by little for years while standing right beside him, and the greatest tragedy was not that he had finally lost her, but that he had failed to notice she was fading long before she ever walked out the front door. Sometimes the people we search for are not hiding from us. They are simply living in the peace we never gave them. 3 days passed without a single message from Emma Moretti. Damian Moretti had resources capable of locating almost anyone in New York within hours, yet her final request echoed constantly in his mind. Please do not look for me until you learn why I had to leave. Every instinct told the white Caucasian mafia boss to send trusted investigators across the country, but for the first time in many years, he forced himself to respect someone else's decision instead of controlling the outcome. He remained inside the estate, surrounded by memories that now seemed impossible to ignore. On the fourth morning, he entered the foundation offices Emma had quietly managed for nearly a decade. Although she rarely spoke about her work at home, every employee greeted her absence with genuine sadness. They did not fear Damian's authority. They simply missed the kindness Emma had brought into their lives every single day. An elderly receptionist smiled politely before handing Damian a folder. Mrs. Moretti asked us to continue these scholarship applications even if she was away for a while. She said the students should never have to wait because adults are struggling with personal problems. Damian opened the folder and found dozens of handwritten notes Emma had attached to individual applications. She remembered birthdays, family situations, medical challenges, and dreams each student had shared during interviews months earlier. None of those details had been required. She had simply cared enough to remember them. As he continued through the offices, another employee quietly approached him. "Sir, Mrs. Moretti always stayed late every Thursday evening." Damian looked surprised. "For meetings?" The young coordinator gently shook her head. "No, she packed food boxes herself before volunteers delivered them to local families. She never wanted photographs or publicity." Damian stood speechless. He had proudly funded every charitable program through the family foundation, believing generous donations fulfilled his responsibility. Emma had personally invested her time, her patience, and her heart. She understood something money alone could never accomplish. Later that afternoon, Damian visited the community center carrying several documents Emma had been reviewing before she left. A little girl sitting near the entrance immediately smiled when she saw him. "Are you Miss Emma's husband?" Damian nodded quietly. "Yes." The child held up a colorful drawing. It showed Emma, surrounded by children beneath a bright blue sky. "Can you tell her I missed story time? She promised she would come back when everything was better." Damian accepted the drawing with trembling hands. "Did she tell you everything would be better?" The little girl smiled confidently. "Miss Emma always says people make mistakes, but kind people keep trying until they become better." Walking back toward his car, Damian realized those simple words described Emma far more accurately than anything written in newspapers or spoken during elegant charity galas. She believed people could change because she had spent her entire life choosing compassion over resentment. That evening, after returning to the estate, Damian walked into the master bedroom and noticed something he had overlooked before. Emma's favorite painting no longer hung above the fireplace. She had taken only that single piece of artwork with her. It was not expensive nor famous. They had purchased it together from a small street artist during their honeymoon because Emma said it reminded her that beautiful things did not have to be perfect to deserve a place in someone's home. Damian slowly sat on the edge of the bed, finally understanding that Emma had never left carrying anger. She had carried only the parts of herself she refused to lose forever. And for the first time since reading her letter, he stopped asking where she had gone and began asking the far more painful question of who he needed to become before he deserved to stand beside her again. The hardest mirror to face is not the one hanging on the wall. It is the memory of the person you used to be before someone loved you more than you deserved. A week passed, and the Moretti estate remained unusually quiet. Damian Moretti continued honoring Emma's final request by resisting the urge to use his influence to track her down. Instead of searching for her, he began searching through the life they had built together. Every room carried another reminder that Emma had quietly held their world together while asking for almost nothing in return. One rainy afternoon, Damian visited the headquarters of the Moretti Foundation, not as the white Caucasian mafia boss everyone feared and respected, but simply as a husband trying to understand the woman he had failed to appreciate. During a meeting with the foundation directors, he asked them to continue every charitable program exactly as Emma had planned. The oldest board member looked at him thoughtfully before saying, "Mrs. Moretti always told us that kindness should never depend on whether life is easy. She believed people needed hope most when everything around them seemed uncertain." Damian nodded silently, recognizing those words as something Emma had once tried to tell him during one of the many evenings he had canceled dinner because another business obligation seemed more important. After the meeting ended, the director quietly handed Damian a sealed envelope. "Mrs. Moretti asked me to give you this only if you ever came here looking for answers instead of looking for her." Damian carefully opened it inside his office overlooking Manhattan. There was only a single handwritten page. "If you are reading this, it means you finally started asking the questions I prayed you would ask long before I left. Please do not waste your energy wondering where I am. Ask yourself why this house became so lonely while both of us were still living inside it. The answer will tell you much more than my location ever could." Damian slowly folded the letter, feeling every sentence settle deeper into his heart. That evening, he canceled another prestigious dinner invitation and remained at home instead. He walked into the kitchen where Emma had spent countless evenings preparing meals she often ate alone after waiting hours for him to arrive. Opening one of the cabinets, he found dozens of neatly labeled containers she had prepared weeks in advance for elderly neighbors recovering from surgery. Even after caring for an enormous household and managing the family foundation, she had quietly found time to care for strangers. Damian suddenly remembered one particular night nearly 2 years earlier. Emma had asked him to attend the annual volunteer appreciation dinner because the volunteers wanted to thank everyone who supported the foundation. He had promised he would come. At the last minute, he chose a private business gathering instead, believing there would always be another volunteer dinner. Emma had smiled gently when he called to cancel. She never argued. She simply said she understood. Standing alone in the kitchen now, Damian realized she had spent years understanding every disappointment while he rarely stopped to understand hers. Looking through old family photographs later that night, he noticed something that broke his heart. In nearly every picture, Emma was looking at him instead of the camera. She had been watching the man she loved while he had been looking somewhere else entirely. Damian closed the album and took a long, steady breath. For the first time since Emma walked away, he stopped thinking about earning forgiveness. Forgiveness was not something he could request or deserve on demand. If there was ever any hope for their future, it would begin with becoming the kind of man who no longer needed someone else to sacrifice their happiness just to keep loving him. And that realization quietly became the first honest step of the long journey he knew he had to walk alone. Real change begins the moment a person stops asking how to win someone back and starts asking whether they have finally become worthy of standing beside them again. Nearly 2 months passed after Emma Moretti quietly left the estate. Damian Moretti no longer measured time by business meetings or financial reports. Instead, he measured it by the promises he chose to keep. Every Thursday evening, he personally joined the volunteers at the Bennett Foundation warehouse, packing food boxes exactly as Emma had done for years without seeking recognition. At first, the volunteers seemed uncertain, wondering whether the white Caucasian mafia boss would stay longer than a few minutes. To their surprise, Damian remained until every box had been carefully sealed and loaded into delivery vans. He listened instead of giving orders. He carried heavy supplies beside college students and retired teachers. For the first time in many years, people saw not the powerful man whose reputation filled newspapers, but a husband quietly learning the value of ordinary acts of kindness. One afternoon, the elderly receptionist who had worked with Emma for nearly a decade smiled as Damian finished arranging scholarship applications. "Mrs. Moretti would have been proud of the way you organized those files," she said gently. Damian paused before answering. "I'm not trying to make her proud anymore. I'm trying to become someone who deserves the respect she always gave me." The woman nodded with quiet understanding. That is exactly what she always hoped for. Those words stayed with Damian throughout the evening. Returning to the estate, he noticed countless reminders of the life Emma had created. The garden she designed was blooming more beautifully than ever because the staff continued following the handwritten instructions she had left behind. The library remained perfectly organized because she had labeled every shelf years earlier. Even the rescue dog they adopted waited faithfully beside the front door every evening, lifting its head whenever a car entered the driveway, as though expecting Emma to return. Damian knelt beside the aging dog and gently stroked its head. "I miss her too," he whispered. The simple confession felt more honest than any speech he had delivered in public. Days later, while reviewing Foundation correspondence, Damian discovered another envelope addressed in Emma's handwriting. It had been scheduled to arrive only after the spring scholarship ceremony. Inside was a list of personal letters she had written to every graduating student. At the bottom of the final page, she had added one sentence intended only for herself. "If kindness leaves a small mark on someone's life, then every lonely day was worth living." Damian closed his eyes, realizing Emma had continued giving hope to strangers even while quietly carrying heartbreak inside her own home. That evening, he stood alone on the terrace overlooking the Manhattan skyline, where he and Emma had once watched fireworks every Independence Day. Instead of remembering the glamorous celebrations, he remembered something much smaller. Emma had once laughed because they shared a single slice of cheesecake after the event ended. She told him happiness was never measured by expensive moments, but by shared ones. He had smiled without truly understanding what she meant. Now he finally did. The following morning, Damian gathered every senior employee and foundation director for an unexpected meeting. Looking calmly around the room, he announced that several charitable programs would be expanded exactly as Emma had envisioned years earlier. He did not place her name on the projects to earn sympathy or admiration. He did it because the work deserved to continue. As the meeting ended, one director quietly approached him and said, "You are beginning to resemble the man Mrs. Moretti always believed you could become." Damian looked toward the bright morning light pouring through the windows and silently hoped that somewhere, even without knowing it yet, Emma might finally be living in the peaceful future she had always deserved, because whether she ever returned or not, he had made one promise to himself that would never again be broken. The greatest surprises in life often arrive only after we stop chasing them and begin quietly becoming the person we were always meant to be. 6 months passed, and the rhythm of Damian Moretti's life had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The white Caucasian mafia boss still carried the quiet authority that commanded every room he entered. His tailored black Italian suit and the intricate black tattoos visible beneath the open collar of his white shirt remaining unmistakable symbols of strength. Yet those who worked beside him noticed something even more remarkable. He listened before speaking. He kept every promise he made. He left the office early whenever the foundation hosted community events because he believed people deserved more than financial support. They deserved someone willing to stand beside them. The transformation was gradual, genuine, and completely unseen by the one person he wished could witness it. Damian never searched for Emma because he had promised himself he would honor the final request in her letter. Instead, he focused on becoming the husband she had quietly believed he could become long before he believed it himself. One crisp autumn afternoon, the Moretti Foundation received an invitation to participate in a regional charity conference held in a peaceful coastal town several hours outside New York. The event brought together nonprofit organizations from across the country to exchange ideas for supporting struggling families and underserved communities. Damian accepted the invitation without expecting anything beyond another opportunity to continue the work Emma had inspired. Arriving at the conference center, he greeted volunteers, educators, and foundation leaders with quiet humility. Gone was the man who once measured success by influence alone. As he walked through the exhibition hall, he paused beside a display featuring educational programs for children who had experienced family hardship. A familiar voice thanked a group of donors just a few feet away. Damian slowly turned, his heart suddenly refusing to follow its steady rhythm. Across the room stood Emma Moretti. She wore a simple light blue dress beneath a cream-colored coat, her chestnut hair resting gently over one shoulder as she smiled warmly while speaking with several volunteers. There was a peaceful confidence about her that he had never fully seen before. She looked lighter, healthier, and genuinely happy. Damian remained exactly where he was. Every instinct urged him to walk toward her immediately, yet he remembered the promise he had silently made months earlier. If they ever met again, it would not begin with demands, explanations, or desperate apologies. It would begin with respect. As the conversation around Emma ended, she looked across the room and noticed him standing quietly near the foundation display. Time seemed to pause between them. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them hurried forward. Emma's eyes widened with surprise before softening into calm recognition. Damian offered only a gentle smile and a respectful nod. He did not ask why she had never called. He did not ask whether she missed him. Instead, after several quiet seconds, he simply said, "You look happy." Emma smiled faintly, the warmth in her expression carrying none of the pain that had filled her eyes on the night she left. "I finally learned how to breathe again," she answered honestly. Damian lowered his eyes for a brief moment before replying, I am grateful. Emma looked at him with quiet curiosity. Grateful? Damian nodded. Because you found the peace I should have protected all along. Those words lingered gently between them. There was no bitterness, no blame, and no expectation. Only two people standing face to face after months apart, both changed by the distance that had once felt unbearable. As another conference session was announced over the speakers, Emma hesitated before speaking once more. There is a community workshop tomorrow morning. If you would like to attend, everyone is welcome. Damian smiled with sincere appreciation. Thank you. It was not a promise of reconciliation. It was something far more precious. For the first time since she had quietly walked away, Emma had opened a small door that neither of them had expected to find again. Sometimes love is not rebuilt through promises. It is rebuilt through quiet moments where neither person asks the other to become someone different. The following morning, Damian Moretti arrived at the community center long before the first workshop began. Instead of his usual black Italian suit, he wore a simple navy jacket over a white shirt, though the familiar black tattoos remained visible beneath the open collar. The white Caucasian mafia boss no longer cared whether anyone recognized his status. Today, he wanted to be another volunteer willing to carry tables, arrange shares, and welcome families arriving with children. As participants slowly filled the hall, Emma Moretti noticed him helping an elderly couple carry several heavy boxes toward the registration desk without introducing himself or expecting gratitude. She watched quietly from across the room, surprised by how naturally kindness now seemed to guide his actions. Months earlier, she would have believed he was trying to impress her. Today, there was no audience to impress. During the workshop, they found themselves working together at the same activity table, where children painted small wooden birdhouses to symbolize hope and new beginnings. Damian patiently helped one little boy hold a paintbrush steady while Emma knelt beside a young girl who proudly decorated her project with bright yellow flowers. Every few moments their eyes met, followed by small, genuine smiles that no longer carried the weight of resentment. At lunchtime, the volunteers gathered outside beneath tall maple trees overlooking the ocean. Emma sat quietly on a wooden bench, enjoying the peaceful breeze when Damian approached holding 2 cups of hot tea. He stopped several feet away instead of assuming he could sit beside her. "May I join you?" he asked gently. Emma smiled and nodded toward the empty space on the bench. They remained silent for several moments, listening to waves roll against the distant shoreline. Finally, Emma spoke first. "The volunteers told me you have been expanding the foundation programs." Damian looked toward the horizon. "I only continued the work you started." Emma slowly shook her head. "No, you made it your own." Damian accepted the compliment quietly before answering with complete honesty. "I finally understood that generosity is not measured by how much money we give. It is measured by how much of ourselves we are willing to offer." Emma felt unexpected emotion rise inside her chest. Those were words that Damian, she remembered, would never have spoken. After another thoughtful silence, Damian looked at her with calm sincerity. "Emma, there is something I have wanted to say since the day we met here." She turned toward him. "You do not owe me another apology." Damian gently shook his head. "This is not an apology." He took a slow breath before continuing. "You gave me 12 years of loyalty, patience, and unconditional love. I spent too many of those years believing you would always be there because you always had been. Losing you forced me to face the man I had become. Finding you again showed me the man I still wanted to be." Emma lowered her eyes, quietly absorbing every word. Damian continued with remarkable peace. "Whether you ever choose to come back or not, I want you to know something. I no longer need forgiveness to prove my worth. I only hope my life from this day forward honors the love you once gave me." Tears gathered in Emma's eyes, not because she felt pressured, but because for the first time she believed he truly understood the difference between asking for another chance and earning one. As the afternoon workshop came to an end, the families thanked every volunteer before leaving with smiling children carrying their painted birdhouses. Emma stood beside the entrance, watching them disappear into the golden autumn sunlight. Without thinking, She turned toward Damien and quietly reached for his hand for only a brief second before letting go again. The gesture lasted no more than a heartbeat, yet it carried more hope than either of them had dared imagine. As they walked back inside together, neither of them spoke about the future, but both silently realized that trust, once broken, does not return all at once. It returns one honest moment at a time. And perhaps this gentle afternoon had just become the first truly new chapter of the story they thought had already ended. The strongest relationships are not the ones that never break. They're the ones rebuilt by two people who choose truth over pride every single day. After the community conference ended, Emma Moretti returned to the quiet coastal town she had begun calling home, while Damian Moretti returned to Manhattan carrying something far more valuable than hope. He carried patience. Weeks passed without daily messages or unexpected visits. Damian respected every boundary Emma had carefully rebuilt. Instead of asking where she was or when she might return, he occasionally sent updates about the foundation projects they had once dreamed of completing together. There were no declarations of love hidden inside the messages, no requests for another chance, only simple photographs of newly opened scholarship classrooms, renovated community kitchens, and families smiling during volunteer events. Emma quietly read every message. She rarely replied immediately, yet each photograph reminded her that Damian's transformation had not ended when she walked away. It had quietly continued without expecting an audience. One Saturday morning, Emma surprised herself by sending a short message. "The children's reading room looks beautiful. They will love the sunlight." Damian smiled as he read her words, resisting every temptation to continue the conversation longer than necessary. His reply was simple. "You designed the original plans. I only followed your vision." Emma stared at the message for several moments before placing her phone aside with an unfamiliar sense of peace. Months earlier, she would have expected Damian to convince her to return. Instead, he consistently honored the life she had chosen while quietly proving that respect had finally become part of his character. As winter slowly approached, the Moretti Foundation organized its annual holiday celebration for hundreds of local families. Emma received an invitation addressed not to Mrs. Moretti, but simply to Emma, volunteer and friend. The thoughtful wording touched her heart more deeply than Damian could have imagined. After several days of reflection, she decided to attend. When she arrived at the beautifully decorated community center, children were decorating cookies while volunteers wrapped donated gifts beneath enormous Christmas trees covered in warm white lights. Damian was standing near the entrance greeting every family personally, wearing his familiar black Italian suit with the open collar revealing the realistic black tattoos that had once symbolized only authority but now seemed to represent steadfast responsibility. When he noticed Emma entering the room, surprise briefly crossed his face before giving way to a quiet smile. He walked toward her, but stopped at a respectful distance. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. Emma looked around the joyful room before answering. "I want to see what everyone has accomplished." Damian gently shook his head. "What we accomplished?" Emma looked at him carefully. There was no arrogance left in his voice, only gratitude. Throughout the afternoon, they worked side by side, serving meals, helping children choose books, and speaking with families whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Watching Damian kneel beside frightened children, patiently listening to elderly volunteers, and thanking every staff member by name, Emma realized she was no longer seeing moments of change. She was witnessing a changed life. As the celebration drew to a close, snow began falling softly outside the large windows. Standing together beneath the glowing lights of the entrance, Emma quietly broke the comfortable silence. "When I left, I believed the only way to save myself was to leave our marriage behind." Damian listened without interrupting. Emma continued, her voice calm but deeply sincere. "Today I realized something different. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I needed to believe that my heart deserved the same care it had always given someone else." Damian nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting quiet understanding rather than desperation. "And now," Emma looked into his eyes for a long moment before offering a gentle smile. Now I believe we finally have a chance to meet each other as two completely different people. Snow continued falling around them as Damian silently accepted the greatest gift she could have offered. It was not forgiveness. It was the possibility of beginning again, built not upon forgotten mistakes, but upon trust patiently earned one honest day at a time. The greatest love stories are not remembered because two people never made mistakes. They are remembered because both of them found the courage to become better before asking for another chance. 1 year later, the Moretti Family Foundation welcomed hundreds of guests to the grand opening of a new family renewal center overlooking the Hudson River. The center had been built to support couples rebuilding trust, single parents creating new beginnings, and children searching for hope after difficult seasons in life. Journalists, community leaders, volunteers, and families filled the elegant courtyard beneath a brilliant spring sky. Damian Moretti stood near the entrance wearing a perfectly tailored black Italian suit. His white dress shirt opened slightly at the collar, revealing the familiar black tattoos that had once symbolized power alone, but now reminded everyone who knew him of loyalty, responsibility, and quiet strength. Beside him stood Emma Moretti, wearing an elegant ivory dress beneath a light beige coat, her warm smile reflecting a peace that had taken years of patience, honesty, and healing to achieve. They were no longer standing together because one of them had refused to let go. They were standing together because both of them had freely chosen each other once again. As the ceremony began, Damian was invited to deliver the opening remarks. Looking across the audience, he paused before speaking with calm sincerity. There was a time when I believed protecting my family meant providing everything money could buy. I eventually learned that the greatest gift we can offer the people we love is not success or influence. It is our presence, our attention, and our willingness to grow when we realize we have caused pain. The audience listened in complete silence as he continued. Someone once loved me enough to walk away instead of allowing both of us to continue living without hope. That decision changed my life forever. Today, this center exists because one courageous person reminded me that healing always begins with truth. Damian stepped back from the podium and gently invited Emma to join him. She accepted with a grateful smile before looking toward the families gathered before them. Leaving was the hardest decision I had ever made, she admitted softly. Not because I stopped loving my husband, but because I finally understood that loving someone else should never require losing yourself. The beautiful surprise was discovering that distance did not end our story. It gave both of us the opportunity to become the people we were always capable of becoming. Warm applause echoed throughout the courtyard as many guests quietly wiped tears from their eyes. After the ceremony, children ran through the garden surrounding the new center while volunteers welcomed families into classrooms, counseling rooms, and community spaces designed to offer comfort and encouragement. Damian and Emma slowly walked together along a quiet stone pathway lined with blooming white roses. They stopped beside a small tree planted during the opening ceremony to symbolize new beginnings. Damian reached into his jacket pocket and carefully removed the same wedding ring Emma had left behind on the dining room table more than a year earlier. Looking into her eyes, he did not kneel, make dramatic promises, or ask for forgiveness. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "This ring no longer represents who we were. If you ever choose to wear it again, I hope it reminds us every day to choose each other with honesty, respect, and gratitude." Emma looked at the ring before quietly taking it into her hands. Tears of joy filled her eyes as she slipped it onto her own finger. "This time," she whispered with a peaceful smile, "I am not wearing it because I feel obligated to stay. I am wearing it because every day since we met again, you have shown me that love is something we build together." Damian gently took her hand, their fingers naturally intertwining as they watched families laughing beneath the warm afternoon sunlight. Nearby, the rescue dog they had adopted years earlier happily ran across the grass toward them, making Emma laugh exactly as she had during the happiest days of their marriage. Damian smiled, realizing that the mansion had once been filled with luxury but empty of connection, while this simple moment contained everything he had nearly lost forever. Together they walked toward the families waiting to welcome them, no longer defined by betrayal or regret, but by compassion, redemption, healing, and a quiet understanding that the strongest marriages are not saved by power. They are saved by two hearts willing to choose love again every single day.